Our next interview is with John DeMarco of Lyrical Ballad in Saratoga Springs, New York. And John, just give us some background. Where you come from, family, schools, where you grew up, siblings, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Take us through high school or college.
Started out in a little mill town, was formerly a mill town, Mechanicville, New York, on the Hudson River, about 20 minutes south of Saratoga Springs, where I ended up opening the bookstore. And I grew up in Mechanicville and spent high school there, and then went to SUNY Albany, State University of New York at Albany, where I majored in English literature, and jumped from there to Saratoga Springs in 1971. But most of my family was in Mechanicville. It was I actually grew up with my great grandparents, which is unusual, because they were a little older. But that's kind of the background.
What did your parents do?
My mother was a licensed practical nurse, and then I had my mother remarried when I was 5 years old, but I didn't live with my stepfather, so I lived with my great-grandparents. My great-grandfather worked in the paper mill, which was everybody did in Mechanicville.
Yeah,
there were about 900, at that time there were like 900 to 1,000 workers in the mill in a town of 8,000 people, so that's where most people worked. Then the mill went out of business. My grandfather retired, everybody, the guys who were older really couldn't move the mill moved to West Virginia, so most of the people in town were older that worked in the mill couldn't do that, so they just either retired or took their pensions, whatever they were.
Do you have siblings?
Half brothers and sisters.
Do they have any interest in books?
Absolutely no interest in books. Not at all.
Can you describe when you first got the book bug?
Yeah, I guess in high school, actually. Well, actually in grade school, because we had a small public library, which was part of our middle school, which became middle school. It was our high school originally, and then we built a new high school. But I used to go to the library. Our library closed in the summer, but you were allowed to take as much out as you wanted in June. So I knew the library quite well, and I used to go home with like big piles of books. And we lived in a very small, my great-grandparents had a small place, so, and I had just one small bedroom with a little bookcase. But I wasn't acquiring books then. I basically took them out of the library. And then when I went to college at SUNY Albany, I used to hunt a lot of the old bookshops. There were a couple of old bookstores in Troy and Albany, and I would go in there and thinking I was rescuing books, not knowing anything about values of books, but I liked English literature, Coleridge, Wordsworth, the poets, Yeats, and I would go there and buy old editions and bring them home. They were cheap, and then I started getting the bug really bad when I was at SUNY Albany, and I started going to used bookshops pretty regularly. And then when I left school, I started going to auctions, and that was when it really started. Instead of buying like one or two books, I started buying boxes of books.
When did you open the store in Saratoga Springs?
1971.
Was that your first venture?
At first, yep. I actually was just out of SUNY Albany. I moved to Saratoga. I was still doing I did a couple of graduate courses at SUNY, and then I left SUNY in 71, and I opened the store. We moved to Saratoga in July of 71, opened the store in September of 71. What happened was by September, after the summer, I started going to auctions. I became like the book guy at a lot of these little country auctions. And whenever they saw, somebody at the auction, they said, "Look, give them that box for $2 or whatever it was." And I started accumulating like huge quantities of books. I actually went back to one of the auction galleries one time. I had bought books at the auction, and I somehow or other I talked myself into buying a gigantic Victorian dresser that I couldn't fit in my car. I had a Carmen Ghia convertible, which was not a bookmobile.
No,
but I used to put the top down and just pile the boxes and tie them out with bungee cords. But I went back to that auction place, and that was my first big haul. I went back to pick up the dresser with a borrowed truck, and the auctioneer said, "You're the guy that buys all the books." And I said, "Yeah, I do buy the books." And he said, "Well, I just got this big collection coming up for an auction." He said, "But I don't want to deal with the books because there's like 75 boxes of books, and they belonged to some guy who was a newspaper reporter in the 50s or something, and he had traveled all around the world, and this was his library." And I said, "What do you usually pay? A couple $1 a box or something?" I said, "Yeah, well, at the auction." He said, "Well, take them all, but you got to take them all. $2 a box." So I piled them on the truck, and I went back to this little apartment I had in Saratoga with 75 boxes, plus all the stuff I'd already accumulated from auctions. And I decided I better do something, so we opened.
Were you married at the time?
Yes, yeah. We found a little storefront in Saratoga for $75, and it was part of an old bank building. And the bank owned the building, and they were the landlord. And I went to them. Somebody had a tack shop in there, horse tack shop, and they were going out of business. And they told us, we knew the people's sister or something, and they said they were going to go out of business. So I said, if you go talk to the bank, you can probably get the space for $75. So did that, and we got the space for $75 in September. I had no money. I had lots of books, but no money. Yeah. And basically, I just went in. I still had student loans and stuff from SUNY, and I went into the space with no ideas how to run a used bookshop.
Green skills.
Yeah,
huh?
really bad. We didn't have a telephone for like over 2 months. We had no sign. I finally got a guy. There was an itinerant sign painter came through Saratoga. He was from Canada, and he didn't speak English. He was French Canadian. He was just starting out, and he came through and he did a sub shop across the street for $25. He painted the sign in their window, and I said, "Could you do mine?" And he did this thing, and the store was supposed to be called Lyrical Ballads Bookstore from the Coleridge and Wordsworth publication. Yeah. Which was my interest, Blake and Coleridge and Wordsworth. And he left off the S, but he did a beautiful job. The sign was perfect. He did it with a plum, and it was a perfect sign. I said, gee, you left off the S. He said, well, I have to take the whole sign off and charge another $25. I said, I can't afford it. So we're going to go with Lyrical Ballad. So it became Lyrical Ballad Bookstore. Within a year, that guy was famous. He became a big sign guy.
Really?
Made lots of money.
Wow.
But he started out just doing that. Anyway, that was the beginning, and we just had I bought some antique tables and stuff at auctions really cheap, and I had a couple of little antique tables, and we had some rough wood bookcases built around the edge. It was only about 450 square feet, I think, the original storefront.
Wow.
But it was cheap, and we got started, and I worked a couple of jobs. I think the first year, by Christmas time, we weren't making a living in the book business, and I got a job managing Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips for a while, and then I got a job being, I guess you call it courier service or something, for an old-fashioned, the days before. If you want to talk about computers, these guys ran like a UNIVAC. It was a computer. It was a room. It was upstairs over where our bookstore was.
Huge.
And they did printout systems for like oil companies. But they needed a guy to be a courier to pick up the papers and pick up all the billings and stuff, and then deliver them. And it was a great job because I got a car to use so I could scout books during the day. They didn't care when I left or when I came back, as long as I was back by 7 o'clock at night. And so I would get the car and I would go travel, and I could, it didn't take 3 or 4 hours to do the job. And so and that was great. And I still could do the bookstore. So I kept jobs like that until it started, I think about 3 years or so, then the store started getting.
Is what you're talking about where you are now?
Yes, same space.
Same space,
been in the same space.
But you've expanded it.
Yeah, we started there in 71, and the bank sold out within a year, about 1972, I think. And then the new landlord came in and we knocked a hole through the back wall where the bank vault was. There was a storage vault for the bank because the main bank was upstairs. And so we got we probably more than tripled the size of the store with that. And then within another year, there was another space that opened up, and we went through another wall and got that space. And then we went to another building, which the guy who owned the building, our original owner of our building, owned the building next door. And he found out that the buildings were sort of compatible. We could go through the wall and still be on level ground. So they put a fire door in. So now we have like about 4,800 square feet.
I know, it's like rooms and rooms and rooms.
Yeah, just
full of books.
Every space.
Every space. Do you have any particular specialties over and above the general?
Yeah, I think when I opened the store, my goal, my dream was, I guess I'd had in mind the Gotham Book Mart and being a literary bookstore and my interest in literature and having stocking English romantic poets and Yeats and all this. And then I realized Saratoga Springs was horse racing and local history stuff became important. But horse racing we got into. So horse racing is like one of our specialties. Now we have probably, I don't know if we have the largest stock of thoroughbred racing books in the country, but we have a big stock of it. And we also do a lot with architecture now is like one of the specialty. But I still try to keep a strong stock of like illustrated children's books. That's been a particular interest of mine. So those 3 areas. And we have a lot of local history because we have to have it. But those 3 things, I guess, children's illustrated books, horse racing, architecture right now are probably the specialties outside.
Big specialties. When you first started in the trade, were there any dealers or any people who were like mentors or who were very helpful to you as a young bookseller?
Yeah, there's a couple people come to mind. There was a fellow by the name of Kenny Dorn out in Johnstown, who was really very helpful. He was good with almost anybody, I think, in the book trade as being very helpful. I didn't have, as I said, when I started, I know it's the old story, but I really didn't have any money, and it really was tough. It was tough to go, and I realized, it took me a while to realize I had to keep buying, and to get the store moving. Because in the beginning, we were getting books, but we didn't know what we were doing a lot. So we would sell things, we'd go to an auction and buy something for $25 and sell it for $50, and it could have been worth $500. But
Yeah.
and that was great as long as people were buying it. But we had to keep getting fresh stock. And I remember, Kenny Dorn gave me advice in the very beginning. We met him early on in the book business, and we used to go out to visit his house and stuff. And he worked right out of his house and had books on the floor, and you'd sit in the kitchen and in the living room and whatever.
The old timer.
Kenny always said, if you see a good book, you got to buy it. He said, you can't. It doesn't matter when you have the money. You got to buy the book and then just turn it over. Don't be greedy and just keep buying books. So I really I took his word for it, and I really started. I did buy books all the time, and I decided early on. If I didn't have the money, I'd go to the bank and take a note. And we'd start doing. I knew how to take 3-month notes and 2 and I would just buy something, finance it, turn it over, get a next deal, and keep going. But I didn't stop. I never let people know that we didn't have money to buy books because I always wanted to buy books. So we started doing that early, and it did work. And then the other person I met early on, the only real big, I guess, a couple of big rare book dealers that I met early on was Howard Mott. Howard came through once, and I had some really great stuff that I didn't really know much about. And they were very, very helpful, very kind. And they invited us over to their house, and I saw books that I didn't know existed.
Right.
I mean, I had actually. It's not true. I didn't know that there was a bookshop in Saratoga called Hennessy's, and they dealt in rare sporting books. And he was basically a gentleman bookseller.
Yeah. He
didn't have to make a living, and he told me that when I first started. He said, don't get the idea that we go to England and what we make in the book business. They lived a nice lifestyle, and he had been Alexander Wolcott's financial manager. And Wolcott left him very well off, I guess, when he died. So they were sort of mentors in a sense. They weren't overly helpful in the sense that I think they kind of discouraged me to go into the book business, but I did it despite that. Yeah. But Howard Mott, I think, was helpful in the beginning. And another dealer, Black Sun Press or Black Sun Books in New York City. Harvey came up a few times in the first couple of years when I was really struggling, and I had a little apartment, and we heated one side of it, and the other side the heat didn't work. And I had my better books up in the apartment. I had a small little bookcase of things that I thought were rare or better, and we did make some good finds in the beginning. And Harvey came one time and bought some stuff from us, and actually offered me more than what I would have priced them, and said, this is stuff. You should be out scouting books. You know what you're doing. Why aren't you? Because I was working a couple part-time jobs then, and he said, well, why aren't you in the store like all the time? We're out buying books. And I said, well, I don't know if I can make it. He said, well, you can make it if you buy stuff like this and you sell it to me, or people like me. He said, you'll make money. He said, you'll make more than you are making $10 an hour in a job. So I started. That was really encouraging, and he had to light a cigarette to keep warm, I think, in our apartment. but he was encouraging, and then from then on, I guess we did start. We were realizing we could sell. We met some other dealers. I met Maddie Needle early on, and Doug Harding, early on in the business, and we became good friends. We did a lot of business together. I traveled to Massachusetts like almost weekly,
really?
to do deals with Matt, buying from Matt or Doug, and got involved in some huge lots and stuff. And I learned a lot from those guys because Matt was selling to lots of other specialized people, and so each of those, whenever I went there, I met somebody who was a specialized dealer. They taught me with their field. They said, this is what kind of things we're looking for. And so I started, in addition to the general knowledge that I had for the store, things I could sell in the store, I knew now I had customers for things like photography and rare pamphlets, or things like you deal in too, Western America. I really had no concept of those things when I first went to the book business.
Well, why would you?
Right.
I mean, you're starting from scratch. And
we had, and I read everything I could get, like all the books about books, but most of that was like pie in the sky kind of thing. You read some of those guys who were collecting at a level that we weren't capable of buying those kind of books in the beginning.
Yeah. What about the internet, John? How does that play in your scheme of things?
The only thing really we check the internet for price values so we know we're in the ballpark. But we don't. Right now we have nothing listed. We don't list books online. We don't sell online. We basically sell out of the shop, or if we do a show, that's it.
You don't issue catalogs either.
We don't issue catalogs either. No.
So it's mainly the shop is your main source. And how many book fairs do you do
right now,
on an annual basis? 2
right now, just the Albany Regional Fair and the Boston International Fair. Yep. We used to do a lot. In the early years, I traveled, a lot. I mean, I used to put a huge amount of miles in the car traveling to bookshops, before the internet days, I guess, traveling to bookshops and doing small regional fairs.
We all did that. And then the internet came along and people stopped having open shops.
Yeah.
It's really tough. I think that's one of the biggest changes in the book business, the dearth of open shops or the death of open shops.
Yeah.
You're one of the few. when you think about it, in a major metropolitan area.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, I miss that. I miss the. I said to my wife, the socializing. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, most of my friends early on, were book people. I would go someplace and do, my vacation or a trip or something would be based on visiting bookshops,
Right.
having dinner with book dealers, talking about the trade, and then that just seemed to kind of, dissipate. And you can even see it at the fairs. I mean, there's less contact. I think the fairs are great because at least you get a chance to talk to other people and
Yeah.
see people, but. The idea of visiting other places and seeing other book dealers in their shops, and everybody now does everything online or checks.
Yeah, I think that what's happened is the book fair used to be a source of gossip, of chit-chat, of knowing what's going on in the trade, and nowadays everybody knows what's going on because of the internet.
Yeah.
And there's a lack of that sort of personal thing between dealers.
Yeah, one thing we've noticed is the small. I mean, well, the book world has always been a small world. I mean, there's no. I was never under the illusion that we were like a major economic, factor in anything. But now I think what's happened with the internet is that there even a rare book, there can be only 5 copies in the world, but people see 5 copies and the whole the whole inventory is now available to everyone.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was a bit of a mystery. You didn't know really. You knew if you were on the road and you were traveling a lot, you'd know that a certain county history or a certain major book was selling for $250 to $300 or something, but you had to be out there to know how many copies, roughly how many copies are. Now you just go online and then people think that's the world inventory, which I'm not sure. We're not online, so if we have something, it's not on there, so it doesn't mean that it's one way or the other, it's common or not common. But
the thing about the inventories you see on the internet, basically those are unsold books.
Yeah, well, yeah.
They're listed. Yep. They're not sold. If they were sold, they wouldn't be on there.
Right.
So there's that to it, too. What do you see as some of the challenges facing us as booksellers in the decades to come?
Well, I don't want to say scariest thing, but the thing I have the most concern about is I don't know if young people are even accepting the book as a viable. I mean, I think the book and form and content is a great. I don't know how. All these machines are trying to duplicate what we already have in the book. The only thing that the machine seems to be able to do that the book, they can't do anything as well as the book, but the only thing it can do is save space. I mean, that I get. Like if you have 500 books and you got to stock them in your house or something and you can get them all on a little machine and you want to travel on an airplane, well, that's great. But other than that, it can't duplicate what we have, I think, form and content of the book. But if young people are only into the electronic stuff and they don't, if you watch TV, there's no ads for books. You don't see a book ad. You see electronics. You see everything you see in the media. Advertising is so that, and obviously advertising works because that's why politicians, everybody does it, and they do it because that's what sells. That's right. The book trade doesn't advertise. Borders, we lost the Borders in Saratoga and the chain went out. Borders never took an ad. You never saw an ad on TV for Borders. Barnes & Noble's maybe as a subsidiary to a History Channel or something, but no one promotes books. They're not promoted in the sense that publishers put ads out when they get new books coming out, but I don't know how we do it. How does the used book trade or the rare book trade advertise itself as a to get people interested, especially young people? I see young people now with cell phones, iPads, computers. We get book calls. We go to houses. They inherited their father's collection. They just want the books out.
Yeah.
They want to buy a big screen TV or they want the newest technology.
They're not interested in checking each book in Abe to make sure that they're not giving it away.
Right. It's iPad 2 or whatever the next thing is.
The next technological revolution.
So we're in a period now where we have, I see it, we see it all day. We have more information than we've ever had, and we have no solutions. No knowledge. Real knowledge is not there. It's lots of information.
If you were entering the book trade at this particular time, would you? And if you did, and if you would, how would you go about it?
Boy. Tough question. I don't know. I'd have to really think about it now. But I think I would probably, if I would still love books, and I haven't gotten away from that in any sense of it. But I think probably now I would find myself really either not necessarily specialize. I could still maybe do a general business, but I would really hone it down so that space and what I had space and content would be I would really scrutinize it. We're so general now. We got to the point where we just to took in everything, so we have this big pile of stuff that's hard to manage. It's very hard to manage. But
are you going to concentrate more on certain subjects?
We're trying to. Yeah, that's our goal now. We have outside of the store. We have a warehouse. We have 5 storage units. We have books. I have collections I built over the years. I have a children's book collection that's quite huge at home, which hasn't entered the store yet. And I have some other small collections. Like I just recently I'm starting to liquidate an architecture collection that I built over years from an interest in it. And those we're going to try to concentrate on a few areas, and then keep our general antiquarian stock more, a little tighter, and get rid of all the excess stuff outside the store. Because cost is, we figure what we're paying outside of with cost between our mortgage on our house, what we pay in rent now. We went from $75 rent to over $4,000 rent, which is a big difference.
And you also have a lot more space than you had at $75 too.
Yeah, no question. But
the world has changed greatly.
But we realize that one thing you can't necessarily control what's coming in, but you can certainly you can have some control of what's going out. So as far as finances, so we're trying to keep that tight. What
kind of traffic do you get in your store during the summer and race season?
It's really good traffic. We get a tremendous mix of people, not only from all over not all over the country, but also all over the world. We built up it's 40 years now, so we built up a decent following of people who come back to us. Like a lot of horse racing people aren't book people necessarily, but they come up from Kentucky and Texas and Virginia and other places. But they because we built a relationship with them, they come every year and they stop in to visit us and they're willing to buy things maybe once a year that they don't buy online, which is really nice. They save up if they want a horse book or something. They think of us at least, or they'll call us sometimes in the off season as well because they know us.
Say it's available.
Yeah. And we get people. And Saratoga now has become kind of a pretty cosmopolitan little place. We have the New York City Ballet, Philadelphia Orchestra, and other special events. So people come through Saratoga. Skidmore College is doing a lot more stuff. They have huge summer programs. So we get a good mix in the summer, and we can sell almost anything in the summertime because we get people from all over the place. Not so the rest of the year, but we have good weekends sometimes.
When is it dead?
It's January, February, March can be really slow.
Yeah. You don't have much of a walk-in then?
Winter weather, weekends will still have some busy times.
And is your wife the only one who works with you?
We have 2 part-time people right now. We used to have a full-time person. We dropped that one. It's been like 4 years since the economic downturn, I think, and that's when we really actually started seeing we had to cut back. It was a little slow actually to react to it. I thought things would bounce back faster. I didn't see 4 years. And then when we realized it, we kind of made some changes. We actually downsized our house. We had a pretty big house, and it was costing us a lot of money to maintain, and we just thought we didn't need all that, and there's just the 2 of us, so we cut some expenses there, and we did a few things in the store, not having a full-time person. We weighed out the idea. We actually did do ABAA books. We had someone we were paying to do that, and some eBay stuff. And we weighed out the expenses and what was involved with our time and stuff. And it really was a wash. That's why we decided not to. We're kind of going against the grain. I know, not doing anything online. We're thinking now we may establish like a little website and do some limited, but we don't really want to be. We don't want to have 15 employees and be working harder just to take care of the employees. So we're trying to keep it so it's a very personalized business. So we think that's kind of the way we're going to head. It may be a mistake, but so far it's working for us because we don't have stuff online. When people do come, they're happy to see stuff that's kind of fresh and not.
So are you contracting?
In some sense, but we're still buying at a level. I'm just trying to figure out how to manage the buying. That's the hard
critical
part.
Mass. I mean, you've got books crammed almost everywhere.
Yeah.
So
the plan is to really have less and do more. This summer we built a new glass display case in the front of our store.
Yeah, which I saw.
And that was got rid of like 600 books and replaced it with books on display. It's just like we were doing a book fair or something. And it's worked out very, very well. We're selling more, we've got more money out of that than we did out of the big section with 600 books. So there's less books, but we're actually doing more business.
Less books and more business.
Yeah.
Sounds like a winning combination, doesn't it?
I think that's where we're going to head more and more.
Okay, well, we've just about come to the end of the line, and it's been a great 30 minutes. Thanks, John.
Great.
Appreciate you coming
Thanks,
through.
Michael. Yep.